Hey, everybody, welcome to Contra Talk. My name is Richard Henry, and this is the podcast where we talk about things that matter. And something that matters a lot is the SBC. You might not be an SBC person. You might despise the Southern Baptist Convention. You might love it. I don't know. But it matters significantly. It's the largest Protestant denomination. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't give much credit to. Even if you're not in it, or you've never been in it, you're not a Baptist at all. But so goes the SBC, so goes much, if not all, of American Christianity, because again, it has such large influence. Well, next week is the meeting. This is another interview with a pastoral candidate, or a presidential candidate, rather, for the SBC. We're talking to Pastor Clint Pressley. He's a pastor in North Carolina and studied widely, been a pastor for over 3 decades, and very, very attuned to what's going on. He's gone to the last 30 meetings as well, SBC meetings, so he knows what's happening. And he tells us why he's running for president. We talk about 990 transparency, financial transparency, building back trust, as well as the sex abuse task force and the law amendment and many other things. That are these problems systemic? Why or why not? And how to solve them as well. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. All right, Pastor Clint Pressley, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here. Doing well.
Good. Well, thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking about your candidacy for president. We've talked to a few other guys already. But before we get to that, why don't you just tell the audience, those who are listening or watching, both, I don't know, who you are and how long you've been pastoring and all that.
Okay. Yeah, I've been here at Hickory Grove for almost 15 years. This coming January will be 15 years. I've been a Southern Baptist pastor since 1992. I got married in 92. Then 6 weeks later, pastoring a church. Me and my wife moved to a church in Southwest Mississippi. It's where I started. My first 2 churches were in Mississippi, and then ended up coming back here to Hickory Grove. Hickory Grove actually was my home church.
Okay.
This is where I became a Southern Baptist. I was saved when I wasn't a Southern Baptist, led to Christ accidentally. I had a camp, and we were going to a liberal Presbyterian church. And then, when I was 15, one of my friends invited me to a Baptist church. I came in and was like, man, I'd never heard anything like that. And my family, we decided to join this church, Southern Baptist Church, and been here ever since. All I ever wanted to do my whole life was be a preacher. And so I'm very thankful to get to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard you preach in person at least twice, at least once, if not twice, at Southern when I was there several years ago, and maybe somewhere else too. But I appreciate it in your ministry. I've noticed it from afar for a while.
I appreciate that. Oh, how about that?
Yeah, small world, as they say.
Yeah.
Well, again, we could talk about a million things, right?
Right.
But we're going to be talking about why you're running for president of the SBC.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, point blank, why you're running for president? We got a lot of guys running this year. I think the most in my.
Wouldn't it be the year that I run to be the most?
I don't know if that's a good thing. I mean, I think I've heard stories about why if there's a lot, then generally things aren't, all hunky dory. So why don't you though? This is an interview for you. Why are you running for president?
Well, I almost did it a few years ago. I almost ran the year that Ed Litton, when he had one term, and then he wasn't going to run a second term, kind of a gentleman's agreement. He ran a second term,
right? And
he decided not to. I was going to run that year. That was the same year that I had conversations with Willie Rice, a friend of mine, and he and I both were talking about running. And Willie wanted to run, and I didn't want to run against him. We would have been the same, in the same position. So I said, all right, man, if you want to so bad. He really felt the burden from the Lord, and I wasn't sure I felt that. And so he said, well, if you're not running, why don't you nominate me? So I was going to nominate Willie, and then, of course, all of that fell apart. Then afterwards, Bart came in.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, then he did 2 terms. And near the end of Bart's term, really just was sensing that might be something I need to do. I had several calls from several guys that I respect, like a lot of people do, and really just want to. I mean, I love the Southern Baptist Convention. I think we need some cooling of the waters and, getting some things buttoned up and turn our attention back to what we need to be doing. So I don't know that I can actually do all of that. Southern Baptist Convention president, I mean, honestly, it's odd how it's been sort of blown up this year. He does not have any legitimate power beyond appointing the committees and running the meeting in summertime over, seeing the meeting, and then just providing influence. I think that's where you would probably find the most worth in the SBC president. So I wanted to be able to do that. I got lots of friends all across the convention. I've been in the convention for all of these years and love it. I don't know that I've missed one in 31 years. And I think what we do when we do it well is excellent. And I'd love to see us be able to do that again.
Amen. All right.
Yeah.
And we're going to be touching on everything as much as we can.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on the law amendment, or the Law Sanchez amendment, the definitive constitutional amendment defining a pastor as a man?
I mean, in short, I think it's excellent. When it came out, and I'm still serving on the board at Southern, we came up with a resolution that sounded a whole lot like the law amendment. I think that's why Mike Law, I didn't know him from Adam. He sent it to me in an email, and I didn't know Mike. I said, but, this sounds like what I believe. Sounds good. I had no idea that this was going to turn into something so big, because to me, it made sense to me. It sounds like that's what we believe. It's what we have believed. I don't know. I have been shocked at the objections. Now, I understand some of the objections are saying it's not theological. It's more procedural. It's more, hey, we're afraid you're going to be going after women who might be on staff. And I just don't see it like that. I'd like to have more clarity, not less. And I think this provides more.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. It's been interesting, to say the least. There's definitely a lot of interesting arguments.
So I didn't know. I mean, here's how ignorant I was. I was not aware that you could not necessarily agree with the BF&M and still be a Southern Baptist until a few years ago. That shocked me. I always assumed that the way you're Southern Baptist is you subscribe to the BF&M and you give to the cooperative program.
Right.
That's what made you a Southern Baptist.
Right.
And it turns out it's not quite as clear cut as that.
It's strange, right? Because I mean, it's like anything else. If you have, we all have house rules that we just probably do instinctively with our family, or guests come over, or stuff at church or at our business, work, whatever. Family reunions, whatever it is, there's things that, hey, we do this, we're this. Right. And it is a very strange time, especially the last few years, but really this year in particular with that you think, wait, hold on. So why are you a Southern Baptist then?
Yeah.
It's reminiscent, and I've not studied it exhaustively, but the 70s and 80s and the conservative resurgence and a lot of the kind of wacky, crazy stuff that was happening then, and the stories you hear about seminary professors or ordaining women then, or the profanities or denial of any number of core doctrines, the virgin birth, literal Adam, global flood, like all these things that you're just like, yeah, they're not salvific, but like these are historic Orthodox doctrines that we've believed as Christians for centuries. Yeah. And now, and in particular, our little slice of Protestant church, or just the church in general, as Southern Baptists, even that's kind of like, well, you don't really need to believe that. It's like, wait, what? It's almost laughable. It's really weird.
Yeah, it has been for me as well. And I actually have friends that I think are probably 100% theologically aligned with me. Like, I've always assumed that, and I'm gonna just extend the benefit of doubt. I think they are. They might be on the other side of this issue, and that's been a little odd as well.
Yeah, that's hard. Hey, everybody, it's me from the thing you're currently watching. Would you mind liking and subscribing? Please do that. It really helps me out. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. that would just, make me so happy. But really, it would actually help out and kind of unlock a little Pandora's box of a number of things that YouTube kind of holds the reins on if you don't have 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And again, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. You're learning something. And if you're going to the meeting, I hope you're going to vote your conscience, whether that's for Clint or for Alan or for Moore or the other 3 guys. There are 6 men running. Maybe there'll be a 7th. I don't know. But we'll see. So again, thank you for watching. Back to the show. Well, I appreciate that. We've got, again, there's so much going on. The law amendment is huge, right? It's passed last year, needs to pass for a 2nd year.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you think it's going to pass personally? Just kind of what you're, finger in the air and finger.
I'm afraid sometimes I feel like I might be in an echo chamber sometimes. So I'm hearing the same voices and they're agreeing with me. So there are points where I think, yeah, it's going to pass. And then other times I think what I'm afraid is going to happen is that it's going to get a majority, but not a super majority, what we got to have. Which would be
60% or something like that. Or
yeah. So I think it'll pass, but it could end up passing, or I'm sorry, getting the majority and then not getting enough for the super majority. And that wouldn't be any fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now if it doesn't pass, we are still very theologically conservative. You get the Baptist Faith and Message. We were able to disfellowship churches beforehand without the law amendment. It just was a little, it was really, it was real clunky, and it didn't need to be like that. It was not easily, or I should say simply done. And I think the law amendment would help with some of that clarity and simplicity.
Yeah, I think so too. Does that change it? You think it kind of sounds like no, then that doesn't really change anything for you or for your church or convictionally or anything?
No, I would be disappointed, but I still think when it comes down to what we're doing together, you get the BF&M, and it is a ruling document for our entities. When it comes to the International Mission Board, there's so many rigors that go into actually becoming a missionary with the International Mission Board that we support. So it wouldn't make me not be a Southern Baptist.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I appreciate you sharing that. All right. What would you do? Because there is a lot of mistrust. You can hear that in the last few meetings. I've only been to the last 3. I know you said you've been for the last 3 decades, which is fantastic. So you have a much, much bigger understanding, more broad. Yeah. But there is, people in the pew, people online, guys with podcasts, blogs, and, there is a reason. Sometimes it can get a little salacious, but there is a lot of truth to it. We have people that don't trust NAM. They don't trust IMB. They don't trust just the platform, the executive committee in general. The plagiarism stuff the last few years ago, and things kind of people being gaslit, or the Resolution 9 stuff from 2019's convention. Oh, wow. There's a lot of things that's like, what are we doing? Like, what's going on? So what would you try to do as president to bring clarity and kind of try to bring back trust for, your average Southern Baptist church that's in the middle of, not in one of the seminary towns, Nashville, Louisville, Atlanta, in North Carolina, South Carolina. There's obviously big strongholds. There's churches, out in Washington or California, the West, the mountains, that are really detached. Because I'm from California, and I was, loosely paying attention then, over 10 years ago. But being here where I am, where I'm in Kentucky, you're much more connected. You kind of know stuff. People know, and there's closeness and conferences, meetings. What would you do to bring back some trust in the convention?
I think that you want to do really in 3 areas. One would be doctrine, other devotion, and then possibly looking toward mission. I think that's real cloudy in the 3. And with that cloudiness comes a mistrust. I think that's why the law amendment is really helpful. It provides real clarity, and you can't say things like, I'm a complementarian, but so I think getting some of that language ironed out, getting some of those clear lines drawn doctrinally helps. I think when you have clarity, it's helpful. It's easier to trust. And then showing some real purpose in our mission. In the cloud of confusion that we're in right now, and there's been plenty of it, whether it's, the sexual abuse talk, or us talking about complementarianism, or having pastors that are female. That has all of that noise has blocked out why we originally came together. There are some really good things that we have going on by way of our International Mission Board, by way of our seminaries. Lord have mercy, in the grand scope of theological education in the world. There's nobody does it like Southern Baptists do it with our seminaries. And then, of course, with our North American Mission Board, they're taking the beating in some areas right now. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to planting churches and promoting that and actually galvanizing and getting a hold of young guys that have a desire to go into ministry, there's some of that sort of recruiting they've actually done a pretty good job with. So I think we can focus on some of those things and highlight them. You know, the first time I went to my first convention as a pastor, I was absolutely broke. Me and Connie, my wife, we didn't have any money. And I rode in a van with my father-in-law and his wife. He was a pastor, to Florida, and went to the convention, stayed in some motel. And I can remember distinctly the commissioning. We used to do this unbelievable job of commissioning those married couples and singles walking in, carrying the flags of the country that they were going to and standing up front. And the convention, you felt like, as a young preacher with no money, man, I'm part of that. We've lost a little bit of that sort of unity. I'm part of that. That's what I'm doing right there. And I didn't know not one of those missionaries. I didn't know one. What I knew is Clear Branch Baptist Church in Lincoln County, Mississippi. We were sending our little bit, and we're a part of that mission. So I think we lack that right now. Now, I know there's several steps to get back to that. And I don't want to skip over those steps or not, look at some of the issues. But ultimately, that's where we got to go.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, definitely focusing. There is a lot of good in how it's structured, right? How the SBC is set up.
Yeah,
is great. I mean, again, you see it with the world, the culture or whatever, writing in whatever article or some cable news channel or something like that. They still have a frame of reference of like the Roman Catholic Church. It's a top-down structure and this. And it's like, no, we're all autonomous. I mean, really, any Baptist church is, and most, pretty much all Bible churches, non-denominational churches are kind of more or less, Baptist, right? But it's something that we've lost, like you said, and we need to recapture. We still have it, right? We still have it functionally. We're still sending missionaries, planting churches, but church planting's down, right? Spending's up, church planting's down, and inflation, but that's not all of it, which will lead us to the next question in a moment. But having that unity of, hey, we're giving our little bit, like you just said. The church I was pastoring, a small church, and we couldn't, if we really tried, maybe we could support a guy and his wife, to go to South America, Africa. But the thing is, he's going to be getting support from other people, and he's going to have to come back and sabbatical, and 9 months out of the year he's working, 3 months of the year he's hustling. And SBC missionaries, especially foreign missionaries, don't have to do that.
Right.
And that's something that I think a lot of people have reasons for leaving the convention, and others remaining. But that's one thing that you really, I mean, to quote a friend, I mean, it's the greatest mission sending organization in the world, the history of the world. Like, that's something. And so having that is giving it up is no small task, and focusing back on that and looking at those things.
Procedurally, if I were the president, and it came time to nominate people for the committees that I nominate them, I would nominate people I know affirm the BF&M 2000 unequivocally. That is what they believe, and affirm that, and no contradiction. That would be something I think is pretty important. It's a safeguard for, there needs to be that kind of safeguard for the conservatism. The thing about being a conservative is you conserve, and that's what I do,
Yeah. No, that's good. That's, yeah. What are we conserving if we're acting just like everybody else? I mean, that's a
Right.
whole other political conservatism. That's another conversation. Um, so regarding church planting, missions, even the seminaries, things like that, that's where a lot of the people, they're not really sure. Even with the guidepost report from a couple years ago, hey, we got to have this, and all of a sudden now it's in this kind of flip flopping, wishy washiness. That's where a lot of people in the pew are saying, well, we're not giving to the cooperative program, or we're going to give barely anything. And so again, that lack of trust. 990s, financial transparency forums, those things. I don't know a ton about them personally, but I know that's something that's going to be discussed at the meeting. What are your thoughts on the 990s and seeking financial transparency for like NAM, IMB, ERLC, things like that?
Yeah, that's been sort of a new topic that's come up in the last year or so, and it feels like it's been over against. There's not any transparency. Now we want transparency. And I absolutely would be for transparency. And I think when you talk about the 990, and I'm like you, I don't know everything there is to know about the 990 form. I do think that most of the information that a 990 would have, most of it, is accessible in some form, whether it's our ministry reports, book reports, business financial plan of the SBC. I think it's probably not in a great accessible and readable format, but I think that it is there with the system we have, where the SBC elects people to the trustee boards. I think there are some breakdown. There's some breakdown with training, maybe with the trustees, with knowing what to do when you get there. But having a board of trustees, and then from that board of trustees, they then are responsible for the financials of whatever entity they happen to be on the board. It seems to me that there's been this press for not so much the 990 form. It feels like a compensation disclosure. Like it feels like that's where we're sort of headed. That kind of is and maybe I'm misreading it, but it feels like that might be the big issue on the table. And I think there's several ways to look at that. I've been in both scenarios. First two churches that I pastored, everything that I made as a preacher, everything, book allowance, whatever, was listed out in the budget for all the world to see all the time, which, was great because I was absolutely broke. I wanted them to know. I'm glad for them to look at it, As time went on, I served a church in Mobile called Dolphin Way Baptist Church. And so set up a check and balance, same as it is here, where the church elects people to a committee, finance committee, and let's say the staff committee or professional staff committee that oversee all of that have all their eyes on all of the finances, every penny that comes and goes. That committee has been given the authority to do that from the church. There are some similarities in the convention. The convention elects the messengers, the trustees that do that. So to say that I would not be for transparency, that's probably not a fair statement. I am for it. I think we just need to do a better job with the trustees and them handling what they're supposed to handle.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think, obviously knowing, what, who makes what would be helpful, I hope, maybe. But at the same time, there is that we want to uncover this thing, and this can apply to many things in life. And it's like, well, now what?
Yeah.
He needs to have a pay cut. Like he's getting paid $250,000 a year, $500,000 a year. That's insane. He needs to get a pay cut. Well, maybe. And I'm not saying, but at the same time, I heard somebody say, I forget who it was, and I love Dr. Mueller. I don't agree with everything, but pretty close. And it's like, whoever said, it was a longtime friend. He went to Southern, graduated years ago, and we were having dinner, and he was just like, Al Mohler, he's like, I don't agree with everything, but he deserves every penny. Like he works so hard, does so many things, and been there for so long, and just the briefing and just so many little things that, we don't always, it's not as quantifiable as a sales job,
Yeah.
or an accounting position, or being a lawyer or a doctor. Anyway, it's tricky. I think the transparency would help, and I think the 990s personally, I'm interviewing you, I know, but I think it would maybe satisfy some consciences for people to say, oh, okay, well, at least I understand where they're coming from for this. Now let's move from here. But I don't know if everybody has that.
It may come to that, and man, I wouldn't stand against it. I'm just saying there is a system that has been set up within the Southern Baptist Convention with our trustees and with the committees within those trustees, like it is in many churches. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, except with some really glaring, terrible examples, for the most part, that has worked. Now, it may be that trust has been lost so much that the only thing that's going to help bring it back would be a straight 990 or something like that.
Would you be for that then, if that was the case? If many people say at the meeting,
I'm not going to stand against that. If it came down to that, that's what we got to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. That's transparent, like you said.
Yeah.
Last couple questions, and these are kind of probably the biggest ones. Of course, the sex abuse task force. There's several different ones. I feel like there's maybe a new one or two. And it's difficult because I listened to your conversation when it was just for you guys that Tom Askell did a couple months ago. And then I've, followed other things and switching jobs and other things. I've not been as knee deep as I'd like to be personally, but it seems that if you're against the law amendment, you're for the sex abuse task force and just throwing money at everything. Or if you're against the law amendment, you're for this. If you're for the law amendment, you're painted, or possibly you are against the sex abuse stuff. And it's like, that's all blown out of proportion. One is systemic, one is not, or this one's systemic, this one's not. Are the problems of whatever it is, 1,300 female pastors and the sex abuse in general that we've seen? And I know this is a big question, of course, probably a whole podcast by itself, or maybe a series, because, we have the Pressler stuff and the Paige Patterson stuff and these other things. And well, some of this was real and some of this was a lie. And now we're finding, and it's just kind of like what to believe. I don't know. And that's part of that trust I think a lot of people are having problem with. Is the system, are either of these problems, just in point blank, the lady preachers, female preachers, and the sex abuse, did the system cause these problems? What do you think?
The system,
like systemic. People just throw that word around. It's a systemic problem. It's this.
The SBC system did not cause those.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's
the way we do churches, autonomy, missions, seminary. The way we're structured did not cause, because there are people that would say it's theological. You have this sort of patriarchal theology causing that, and I reject that.
Okay. So how do you, no doubt there'll be people who believe the system, and really, to be honest, this is something we see in the culture, right? Especially from unbelievers, I want to tear it all down, right? We've seen this tearing down of statues in the last few years. We've seen the burning of buildings. We've seen, the trouncing of the flag, on and on and on. Well, within the SBC, I think we need to be cautious, if nothing else, far more wise and prudent, to not assume that everybody has. I mean, I've heard people even say that there's possibly these aren't even real Christians. There's people here that have been plants. Now, again, that's probably another podcast, but like they want to destroy the system. They want to bankrupt the SBC. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, and how do you answer those people who say, no, Brother Clint, absolutely the system. Look at the patriarchal this. Look at this. Look at all these male preachers. Look at and the sex abuse and the youth pastors abusing the kids and this thing and that. And they just kind of throw a bunch of stuff at you. How do you answer those objections who do say that it is systemic?
Yeah, I would say that what you're attributing to the system should be found in the heart of man. What you're talking about is depravity, that every part of who we are is affected in some capacity, some way by sinfulness. That's going to show up. and it shows up in these weird and perverted ways that have nothing to do with the system we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. It wasn't on the list, but it's related. I know there was talk about, a database, things like that.
Yeah.
For the sex abuse, and again,
Yeah.
you're not for sex abuse. I just know you're not. I assume you're not, right? You're
Right.
a pastor who loves the Lord Jesus,
Right.
loves his family. I'm not for sex abuse either, at all. And so, I mean, I don't know anybody who is, and it's kind of one of those interesting kind of. Well, you're for the law amendment, though. That means you're for sex
Right.
abuse, and that's kind of this straw manning that goes on.
Yeah.
What about would a database? I mean, I know again they kind of had a website for a while, then it came down. What do you think on that? I mean, I think some people, again, to play devil's advocates.
Okay.
Weird phrase, but such a weird phrase. But the people who say, yeah, but this guy went here, he was in Kentucky, and then he went to North Carolina, and then he went to Texas, and nobody did anything, and it's the system, and they do this, and that was, we heard that a few years ago. How should a church be vetting a guy who wants to be a pastor, especially a youth pastor, or just really any pastor, anybody on staff, who these have been the people who have, according to the reports, been the main ones who have caused the systemic problems.
Right. Yeah, I would put that at the church level responsibility. I mean, you used the word, and I think you probably used it correctly, that the church ought to be vetting those that they're hiring. There's a certain level of responsibility that you do due diligence and over and above due diligence to find out who it is you are bringing in to the flock of people that God has given you to give oversight and leadership to. And so there's a certain level of responsibility that goes, on the church and those leading the church to do all of that due diligence and make the calls and find out and investigate. And you do that more times than not, you'll be able to prevent a problem. Now, there are times when those come through the cracks, or there are people that there's no record that did anything wrong before, and they come to your congregation, and that's where they commit some heinous sexual abuse. Then, of course, you go into react. You couldn't have stopped that, but you are responsible for the care of someone that is a victim and for the expulsion and the full extent of the law for the person that's committed the crime.
Yeah. No, I think there is a lot of assuming wrongly of people who are more sympathetic to the sex abuse, because it happened. Things have happened. Things will happen. Like you said, the depravity of man. It isn't new, unfortunately. And that's also not an excuse to say, well, whatever, it happens. That's certainly not what you're saying, I don't think either. But there is this level of, well, we got to do so much more. And that's, that in one sense, that's kind of the kind of more progressivist leftist ideology of politics. People want to just like, if we could just control everybody. I've had conversations, with secular people about that. And you're like,
since this has come up. I mean, truthfully, the one of the big helps it's been to the church and our church here at Hickory Grove is to make sure, do we have right policies in place? Are we taking right steps? Are we training the people correctly? Are we providing the right modes of protection? What are we doing what are we doing to take care of someone that's a victim? Making sure we examine everything. So that has been helpful in that regard. You do some self-reflection and think, I don't want to be a church that is not safe for people, those that are vulnerable. I want to be a church where people that are vulnerable feel safe and actually are safe. So that's been helpful in that regard, attitude, right. I would say.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's really good. Do you want to add anything? You have anything, closing thoughts you want to add for this, for going into next week's meeting? Why people should vote for Pastor Clint Pressley?
I'm not going to politic except to say that I love the convention, and I think our house needs some cleaning, but we've got a really good house. And I think instead of destroying the house, I think we need just to do the cleaning and get back to what we do best. I don't want to overlook problems or act like they're not there. Let's address them to the degree we can so we can get back to holding up especially our missionaries, International Mission Board, planting the churches, our seminaries doing such great work. I want to be a part of that.
Perfect. Clint, where can people find you? What's the church? You on socials, Twitter, things like that?
Yeah, Hickory Grove Baptist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's our church. I am on Instagram and on Twitter. Clint Pressley, I think, is what it is. I'm not hard to find. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if anybody has any questions or they want to support the potential new president as per next week. It's next week, right? 2 weeks.
Right.
Next week.
No, bro, it's next week.
Yeah, it's next week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whew. It'll be good. You'll be there. I won't be there, but I know many people will. And so definitely, this has been good. Very, very helpful.
Hey man, I appreciate your time, Richard. Really do.
Yeah, no. Glad we made it work. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, brother.
God bless. Welcome to Country Talk. My name is Richard Henry, and this is the podcast where we talk about things that matter. And something that matters a lot is the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention. It's the largest protest. It's too hard to speak. It's just too hard. We're gonna go again.